All right. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for NHS Online today. We got a few of our leaders in here. We got Lucas here behind me. He's about to play a little bit of worship music. So really excited about that. But before we get started, I just want to let you know this is our first ever actual live NHS we've ever done. Seriously, it's the first one. It's pretty crazy. The other ones that we did when we first got quarantined were all pre-recorded and we premiered them. And then we've been back in person for 3 weeks, and now we're live. So be excited, but also be graceful, because I have no idea what's about to happen. But I'm confident that's going to be good. I'm confident that God is going to speak to each and every single one of you. He's with you no matter where you are, and He has a message for you today. So I'm so excited for everything that is ahead. And before we get started, let me just pray, and we'll get started with our first song. God, thank you so much that you just love every single person right now that is tuning in and watching, whether they're watching it live or they're watching it later on in the week. Lord, I pray that you would just touch them and you'd reach them, that you'd speak to them exactly where they are so that they might draw closer to you and your love for them. In Jesus' name, amen.
Right. Dude, this is weird. This is I'm more nervous than when there's people here, but let's do it. All right, since we didn't get camp this year, even though we would have been there 2 weeks ago, I'm going to do a camp throwback song to kind of get us in the spirit. All right. Sorry. All right. Everything that we have built up will not stand through time. We held on to ashes, empty and void of life. God, turn our eyes to see the glory of the coming King. We can only love one God. Oh, 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 oh. We want your kingdom. Come have your will done. Where you lead us, we will follow. Picking up the cross, lay down every idol, counting all as lies. We're answering the call to the one who came and gave it all. We can only love one God. We're either all in or we're not. Oh, 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 oh. We want your kingdom. Come have your will done. In oh, 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 oh. We want your kingdom. Come have your will done. We want your kingdom. We want your kingdom. Come have your will done here. All right. I told you I'm more nervous. I dropped the pick and everything. What the heck? Thank you. Okay. Wait, where'd my music go? Got it. He's jealous for me. Love's like a hurricane. I am a tree bending beneath the weight of His wind and mercy. sudden. I am unaware of these afflictions, eclipsed by glory. And I realize just how beautiful you are, how great your affections are for me. Oh, how he loves us, oh, oh, how he loves us, how he loves us all. He's jealous. He is jealous for me. Love's like a hurricane. I am a tree bending beneath the weight of his wind and mercy. Yes, Jesus. When all of a sudden I am unaware of these afflictions, eclipsed by glory, and I realize just how beautiful you are, how great your affections are for me. Oh, how he loves us, oh, oh, how he loves us, how he loves us, oh, come on, how he loves us, whoa, he loves us, oh, he loves us, oh, he loves. We are his portion, and we are his portion, and he is our prize, drawn to redemption by the grace in his eyes. And if grace is an ocean, we're all sinking. So heaven meets earth like an unforeseen kiss, and my heart turns violently inside of my chest. I don't have time to maintain these regrets when I think about the way that he loves us. Oh, he loves us. Oh, he loves us. Oh, he loves. One more time, come on. Oh, he loves us. Whoa, he loves us. Oh, he loves us. Oh, he loves. He loves us. Oh, how he loves us. Oh, how he loves us. Oh, how he loves.
That's awesome. Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Killing it. You know, that, glad you played that song today, because that song is like one of my all-time favorite jams. I remember I was 16 years old. So I was about to say your age, but you're 2 years older than that now. Time flies, yeah. But 16 years old, rededicating my life to God, and that was the song they played on a loop over and over again. It's a really special song. But again, so glad that all of you joined us tonight online, live streaming, or maybe you're watching this later. If you've been with us for the last few weeks, we've been in a series called Care and Courage During Chaos. Now, I have to confess to all of you, okay? Last week, I said it was the last week of the series, and I lied. Well, I didn't necessarily lie. It was more of God changed my mind. So This last week, I was kind of just sitting in my desk in my apartment, and I was just doing my devotional. I wasn't reading my Bible to try to come up with a sermon, but I didn't yet know what the sermon series was going to be on and what the next sermon series was going to be and what I was going to talk about this Sunday. I was doing my devotional. I was reading Daniel chapter 3, and as I was reading Daniel chapter 3, God just started to speak to me, and God started to just share all these different, just amazing pieces of truth from his word with me from Daniel chapter 3. And I started to realize that Daniel chapter 3 is one of the most amazing passages in the Bible talking about courage. So then I was like, oh my gosh, okay. So I got to go back and we got to, do at least one more week in this Care and Courage During Chaos series. So then I started getting into Daniel chapter 3. I started saying, okay, all right, what's this sermon going to be about? And I started getting so much from Daniel chapter 3 that I was just like, you know what? I'm going to have to turn this into 2 messages. So if it's okay with you, we're going to have 2 more weeks through this series of Care and Courage During Chaos. And we're going to continue during these next 2 weeks to focus on the aspect of how you can have courage in the middle of chaos. Now, last week I defined courage as is when you leave your comfort zone to do something for the sake of the community. When you do something that is loving for the community around you, but it takes courage for you to do it because whatever you have to do to love the people in your community, you have to step outside of your comfort zone. Now, here's the truth and here's the reality, is none of us really like to step outside of our comfort zones. I don't like to step outside of my own comfort zones in my own life. And you see, it can be so hard to follow Christ and to be a Christian in today's culture because really to live the way that Jesus wants us to live and to follow Jesus and to put him first in our life, it's going to cause us to come outside of our comfort zones. It's going to cause us to do things counter to the culture and the world that we live in. In fact, the current of the culture today makes it very hard for us to be courageous. Now, I want us, before we go even any further, I want to explain those 2 words that I just used, the word culture and the word current of the culture we live in. Okay, what is culture? Culture is a common set of behaviors within a community. So, right, there's global culture, America has a culture, California has a culture, right? The Bay Area has a culture, Benicia has a culture, right? A part of American culture is technology, right? A part of just culture, right? It's a common set of beliefs in American culture, right? It's pretty much almost everybody has an iPhone or a smartphone. And it's common behaviors in American culture, right? To always have your phone and for it to always be glued to you. Well, 50 years ago, that wasn't a part of culture, right? 50 years ago, they called people on like these things called like telephones. And they were at your house and it's really weird. They were still around when I was a kid, but literally, that's like not really a thing anymore, right? And technology has rapidly changed, and that's a part of today's culture. So when I'm using the word culture, that's what I mean. It's what's common. It's what most people do. It's what most people think in whatever place you're in. Now, when I talk about the current of the culture you're in, now what's a current? Well, a current is a strong force of water moving in a direction, whether it's like in an ocean or a lake or a river. In fact, when I was thinking of a current, one of my least favorite movies of all time came to mind. Maybe you've seen this movie before. I'm sure most of you have. It's the movie Finding Nemo, okay? Now, I have to be honest with you. Finding Nemo is probably my least favorite animation movie of all time. And there's a whole story that has to do with that, with me having to watch it basically 6 times on a long car ride one time and just wanting to like kill myself because I had to watch it so many times. I was like, this is over, I'm done. But anyways, right, if you've seen Finding Nemo, right, there's that scene where Dory and Nemo's dad are searching for Nemo, right? They're on a mission to find him, and they're trying to get into the East Australian Current, right? And it's in that moment where they run into Crush, who is my favorite character in my least favorite movie, right? Crush the turtle and his son, Little Crush, or whatever his name is, right? And what do they have to do, right? They have to get on the East Australian Current, and they get on this current of water that takes them to where they need to go, right? And it's like this strong current of water that you don't have to do anything, right? You sit in the current, and the current moves you because it is powerful. And it's where all the water is going. So all you have to do is sit in the current, and it just pushes them through. And it's powerful. And you see, when it comes to today's culture and the current culture that we live in, there's this strong current in our culture. where what the crowd is doing and what everybody is doing, it's so powerful and it's so strong that oftentimes you can be in the middle of the culture and be so influenced by it and you don't even know it, and it just pulls you along and you just do everything that everybody else is doing, even though it might be wrong. And it happens in this world. And so what I want to talk to you about today, and the title of my message today, is courage to not be carried along by the current of culture. You see, because here's the truth, is most people are carried along by the current of the culture we live in, and they don't even know it. In fact, I would even say a lot of Christians, people that genuinely love Jesus, they follow Jesus, and rather than following Jesus, oftentimes they follow the crowd. Now, really, when you follow the crowd, that's just another way of saying you're following the culture. You're following the common set of behaviors that everybody else is doing. Now, I want to be clear here, is not every single part of the world is bad, right? Like, not all parts of culture are wrong, right? Like, one of the things, fun fact for you, I found this out a little while ago, peanut butter, okay? I love peanut butter. Peanut butter is a thing in American culture. But if you go to like other cultures in the world, like people hate peanut butter, which I like blew my mind because I was like, what? Peanut butter is like the best thing in the world, right? But I realized it's like a thing in American culture, right? You go to the Middle East, like they think peanut butter is disgusting. So my point is there are actually good parts of our culture. There are good parts of our world, but there are also some really sinful and dark and terrible parts. And so we need to learn to enjoy the parts of our world and to enjoy the parts of our culture that aren't bad, that are gifts from God. But we also need to realize the parts that are actually the opposite of God and the opposite of what He's designed for us. And we need to learn not to go along with the current of that culture, but to stand up and have courage in the midst of it. And you see, in Daniel chapter 3 today, that passage I was telling you about that struck me so personally this last week, it is literally one of the most powerful stories when it comes to courage in the Bible. And so I want to read to you different parts of it today. We're going to go through this amazing story. And I want to just share with you 2 points today on how you can have courage in the middle of the world's current of culture that can just pull you along. So here's the first point I want to make today, and then we're going to get into the story. It's this. The first point I want to make is this, is that many people are carried along by the current of culture. And we see this in this story. I want to read it to you. Daniel chapter 3, verse 1, all the way to verse 7. This is how the story starts. King Nebuchadnezzar made an image of gold, 60 cubits high and 6 cubits wide, and he set it up on the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. He then summoned the satraps, the prefects, the governors, and advisors, and treasurers, and judges, magistrates, and all the other provincial officials to come to the dedication of the image he had set up. So, right, he has made this like huge statue, this huge, just colossal monument, and it says this. So the satraps, prefects, governors, advisors, treasurers, judges, magistrates, and all the other provincial officials assembled for the dedication of the image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up, and they stood before it. Then the herald loudly proclaimed, "Nations and peoples of every language, this is what you're commanded to do. As soon as you hear the sound of the horn, the flute, the zither, the lyre, the harp, the pipe, and all kinds of music, you must fall down and worship the image of gold that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. And whoever does not fall down and worship will immediately be thrown into a blazing furnace." Therefore, as soon as they heard the sound of the horn, the flute, the zither, the lyre, the harp, and all kinds of music, all the nations and peoples of every language fell down and worshiped the image of gold that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. So here's what's happening. Here's what's so crazy, okay, is King Nebuchadnezzar, he constructs this huge statue. It says that it's this ginormous statue, and actually all the measurements that they tell us about it in the Bible, if we put it in like modern day terms, just to give you a little bit of a picture of how big the statue was, the statue is basically about the size and length of like half of a football field. So this is like a ginormous statue. It says that it's covered in gold. Now, there are basically 2 different kind of versions. This is my new mic. Okay. Cool. So this is what's basically happening. Okay, could they not hear me before at all? They could hear me? Okay, so this is just better. Cool. So here's what's happening with the statue, okay? It's gold, it's huge, it's like half the size of a football field. Now, it was a lot of Bible scholars think that this statue was actually an accurate representation of King Nebuchadnezzar. So basically what's happening here is King Nebuchadnezzar made a statue of himself, this ginormous statue, and he's telling people to bow down and to worship the statue, meaning worship him. So that's option number one. Option number two is the statue isn't representing King Nebuchadnezzar, but it's basically representing some sort of god in their culture in Babylon. But either way, what's happening here is King Nebuchadnezzar, as the king of Babylon, he's ordering everyone in his country. He's saying, hey, we've built this huge statue, and we're going to play all this music, and whenever you hear the music played, we're going to play a whole bunch of different music. We're going to play it loudly. Whenever you hear that, you are commanded to fall down on your knees and to worship this false god. And if you don't do it, you'll be killed. If you don't do it, we're gonna take you and we're gonna throw you into this fiery furnace to be killed. Okay? So talk about an intense cultural moment. Now, I want you to get this. How do the people respond to King Nebuchadnezzar commanding them to do this? Well, it tells us in the story. It says that peoples of every nation did this, meaning that it was common in this culture when the music was played for people to bow down and to worship this false god. And what does the Bible tell us? The Bible tells us that most people did it. The Bible tells us that people of every nation, tribe, and tongue worshiped this false god, meaning they followed the crowd. They did what was comfortable. They didn't want to be thrown in the fiery furnace, so they decided to worship this false god even though they knew it wasn't the true and living God. Now, this is a really big problem, and you might ask, well, okay, I could see why this might be a really big problem, but I'll tell you another reason why this was a problem is in Exodus chapter 20, verse 1, we see the first commandment of the 10 commandments. And here's what the first commandment says. In Exodus chapter 20, verse 1, it says this, that thou shalt have no other gods before me. That's the first commandment in the 10 commandments. Now, the reason it's the first commandment is because it's the most important commandment. Why? Because the most important thing that you can do with your life is to love God and to love other people. And when you put a false god before the true and only living God, what you're doing is you're worshiping a false god in the place of the real God. And you see what's happening in this story is King Nebuchadnezzar, he's saying, hey, I want you guys to worship me. I want you to worship this false god rather than the living God. And most people do it. They follow the culture. They do what everybody else was doing, right? They stay inside their comfort zone. They are not courageous and stand up to the culture. Now, you might think that this doesn't have much relevance today, but I'll tell you, it has immense relevance of today. Because here's the thing, is in today's culture and in the Bay Area and in Benicia where many of you live, right? Here's the truth, is you probably have never met anybody that bowed down and worshiped to a wooden idol, right? Like you've probably never seen that happen. Unless like you were around like a really weird group of people and maybe they were doing some really weird stuff. Maybe you've seen that. But most of you have probably never done that. You've probably never seen or known anybody that did that. But here's the thing, is we worship idols today all the time. Because you see, what idolatry is, it's whenever you have an idol in your life, you make an idol in your life, you make something first in your life other than God. It's when you love something more than you love God. It's when you have more allegiance to something more than you do to God. When you're committed more to something than you are to God. And you see, we have idols in our culture of all different shapes and kinds and sizes. There are idols when it comes to how you dress. And people, they make an idol of their image. And what's most important to them is how they look and how they dress. And so they put all this time and energy and effort into working out and into dressing nice so that everybody could think that they look cool. There's idols when it comes to success. And so success is most important to you, and that becomes your idol. And so since you love success more than you love God, you'll do anything you can to get the best grades, to get on the best team, to be the best player, to get in the best college so that you can get the best job. There's the idols, I'll say this, of politics. We're in an election year, and maybe you don't know much about politics, but maybe your parents have been talking about it like crazy, and it's been driving you crazy, right? But we're in an election year, and here's what happens in an election year. People make the president or just politics in general, they make it an idol. And that becomes their number one hope. And that becomes their number one love. And that's what they talk about with everybody. It's like, why don't you talk about Jesus as much as you talk about politics? Politics becomes a false idol. Relationships become a false idol, where the person that you want to be with or the person that you're with becomes an idol, and you love them more than you love God. And so then the result is you do a bunch of things with them that you shouldn't do before marriage. And that becomes an idol. You see, there are so many things in our life. John Calvin, one of my favorite theologians of all time, he said that human hearts are like this idol factory. That our hearts are like this idol factory that are constantly producing idols. We're constantly grabbing on and holding on to things in this world and putting them above God. But you see, whenever you make something or someone an idol in your life, what you're doing is you're being swept up in the current of the culture we live in. Because you see, our culture is this strong current that is trying to convince you to worship these idols. Every single movie, every single song, almost every single one, not all of them, but they're pushing this message that you need to worship this relationship. Right? I just watched Tangled today, this afternoon. Jamie and I watched Tangled today. Okay? It's a great movie, by the way. I love Tangled. All right? But you know what? Basically, the whole message of the movie is that you need to find somebody to make you whole, and unless you have them, like, your life is not whole. And basically, you're in darkness if you're not with them, but when you're with them, you're in light, and when you're with them, your whole life is better. Right? And that's basically the whole narrative of Disney and of so many different movies, is they say, if you have this, fill in the blank, whether it's a relationship, a job, whatever, if you have this, then you'll be happy. And see, that's the powerful current of culture. They're convincing you, they're telling you, they're teaching you, this is what you need, and if you don't have it, your life is nothing. But let me tell you this, following the culture will kill your soul. Let me say it again. Following the culture will kill your soul. I remember when I was in 8th grade, and I was on a camping trip with my family, and there was this kind of river area where all the kids kind of went, and we played in the river, and it was a really good time. And you know, I've always loved swimming, so we pretty much were in the river most of the camping trip. And I remember at one point we were all in the river together, and all of a sudden the current just got way stronger. And in fact, the current got so strong that I couldn't fight it any longer. I couldn't swim against it any longer. And it actually started to sweep me away. And I was going down this river, and I just start freaking out. I got like water going up my nose and in my ears. Like, I'm just freaking out. And out of nowhere, my stepdad, he like ran along like the riverbank. He went into the river, and he like grabbed me and pulled me out and literally saved my life. And in fact, I actually have a photo that I want to share with you guys real briefly of right after that event. Do we have the photo of him saving me? Does it go up on there? Okay, yeah. So there's this photo, right? And this is like right after. So he had already saved me. He actually didn't have to give me CPR, but that's basically was right after that. He saved me right out of the riverbank. But here's the thing: is luckily I didn't die because I had somebody to save me. And here's the good news. Okay, is when you fall into the current of culture and you allow culture to be what pulls you in and what you follow, ultimately, if you do that, it will kill your soul. But the good news is this, is that you have a God, that you have a Jesus that loved you so much so that he died on the cross in your place for all of your sins, including all the times you loved something more than you loved God. That when he was on the cross, he took on all of your idolatry, all of your junk, all of that stuff. When he was punished on the cross, he was punished in your place and rose again 3 days later, so that if you place your faith in him, all of that's forgiven. And it's as if you've always placed him first. You've always had a right relationship with him. And like that song that says that we were singing earlier, that his love is with us. It's powerful. Oh, how he loves us so much so that he would run into the river as we're drowning, as we're being pulled away by the current. And he comes in and he pulls us out when we could never pull ourselves out. That's what Jesus did for you. It's what he did for me. But you see, whenever we do follow the culture, when we allow the current to sweep us away, it kills our soul. When we make an idol out of relationships, it kills our soul. When we make an idol out of success, it kills our soul. Now, like I said in the beginning, not every aspect of culture is bad. The last thing I want to come across as is like, okay, like everything in the world is bad and we just need to like burn everything, okay? That's like not what the Bible teaches. The Bible says there's a lot of great things in culture, but there's also really a lot of bad things in this world. And that culture can be this current that sweeps us away. So what we need to do and what we need to discern is this. This is the question you have to ask yourself. Which parts of the culture and which parts of the world are good, and which parts of the world are bad and are things that I need to stand up to and be courageous to, right? So like, what parts of the world are like peanut butter, or like it's a good part of the culture, right? Like you can accept that, right? Just because something is, quote, worldly doesn't mean it's bad. But then what are the other parts of the culture that if I go with that current of the culture, it will sweep me away and away from God and away from his best for my life? And so I want to ask you a question. Is what currents of our culture have you gotten pulled away from? What parts of the current of our culture have you kind of jumped into the river and it's just like pushed you away? Here's the truth, is you will never be able to get out yourself. Only God can get you out. And once he gets you out, he will make you courageous so that you could stand up and you could help other people get out. But you see, the problem is people, rather than transforming the world through being courageous, they conform to the world by being cowardice. And so then the question is how do you get this courage? How do you allow God to save you from just being swept up in this current of culture? Allow him to save you so that then you could be courageous and then go and share the message with others. How do you do that? Well, that brings us to my second point. It's this, and we're going to continue in the story. But the second point is this, is that courage ultimately comes from trusting in the power and goodness of God. Courage does not come from yourself. All right, we talked about this last week. It's not like you're, Shia LaBeouf and you're screaming at yourself in a mirror and you're just saying, just do it, right? I need to be more courageous. No, it comes from trusting in the power and the goodness of God. So to pick up in the story, King Nebuchadnezzar, he makes this commandment. He says, when this music is played, everybody needs to get down on their knees. They need to worship this idol. They need to worship this statue. And if they don't, they will be thrown into the blazing furnace. Well, turns out there are 3 guys that are courageous. 3 guys. I'm sure there were more, but these are the 3 guys that get singled out. There are these 3 guys, and they have awesome names. They're like the classic Bible names, right? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, right? Like, if I have kids, like, those are like, I think I'll use all 3 of those names. Like, those are just like the coolest names ever, right? But Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they do not bow down when everybody else is bowing down. Now, as you can imagine, when the king hears about this, he gets super upset. He gets really angry. And so let's read about his response. It actually is in verse 13 to verse 18 in Daniel chapter 3. This is what it says about his response and his conversation with these 3 guys. It says, furious with rage, Nebuchadnezzar summoned Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So these men were brought before the king, and Nebuchadnezzar said to them, is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the image of gold that I have set up? Now when you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipe, and all kinds of music, if you are ready to fall down and worship the image I made, very good. But if you do not worship it, you will be thrown immediately into a blazing furnace. Then what God will be able to rescue you from my hand? Do you see the pride in King Nebuchadnezzar? He's like, nobody can save you from me. He's like, what God can save you from me? I'm all powerful. I'm all knowing. Worship me. But then this is their response to him. It's so powerful. Verse 16 to verse 18. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to him, King Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it, and he will deliver us from your majesty's hand. But if he does not, we want you to know this, your majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up. So here's what we see. King Nebuchadnezzar, I like to call him King Nebi. That's what my Old Testament professor in Bible college called him, right? King Nebi, right? He is furious. He is pissed off. Why? Because these three guys are standing up. They're not staying in the comfort zone. They're not following the crowd. They're not doing what everybody else is doing. No, what are they doing? They're standing up and they're saying, you know what? We're not going to worship any false gods. We're not going to worship you, and we're not going to worship anybody else other than the one and the true and the only living God. And so he says, you know what? I'm going to give you one more chance. I'm going to give you one more chance. We're going to play the music again. And when we play that music, you better bow down. Because if you don't, you're going in the furnace, and we're going to kill you. Now, let's just think about this for a second. Okay, put yourself in these guys' shoes. You are being, like, it's a full-on death threat. If you don't worship this false god, you're going down. You're going to die. And it would be at this point, honestly, if I was in their shoes, man, my heart would be racing. And I would like to say that I would be as courageous as these guys, but you know what? I wouldn't know until I'm in that situation. I would pray if the Spirit of God would give me the courage to say, no, I'm not going to back down. I'm going to worship my God, and you can't tell me to worship these false gods. But this is what these guys do. Their life is on the line, and they say, you know what? We're not going to worship this false god. We're not going to bow down. Why are they not going to bow down? Why do they have this courage? For two reasons. They believed in the power of God and the goodness of God. So first, the power of God. They say, God is able to save us from this furnace. They said, you know, they basically tell King Nebuchadnezzar, they say, go ahead, do it. Try me. They're basically like, throw us in the furnace, because here's what we believe. We believe that even if you throw us in the furnace, God can save us. Because God is powerful. God can do anything. But not only is God powerful, God is also good. One of my favorite book series of all time, the Narnia series, written by C.S. Lewis. Maybe you've seen, one of the few of the Narnia movies, like The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. But there's a scene in the book, and I think it might be in the movie too, but I'm not sure. But it's in the book, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. And there's this scene where the beavers are with the humans, and they're bringing them to meet Aslan for the first time. And Aslan is the lion in the story, but C.S. Lewis was a Christian, and when he was writing the story, Aslan is very much a representation of Jesus. So he's like this big, powerful, scary lion, but he's also good. And so there's this scene where the beavers, they're walking with all the humans to take them to Aslan for the first time, so they don't know what he's like. And they ask the beavers, they say, is he safe? Because he's a lion, right? So they're like, is he safe? And the beavers laugh. They go, oh, he's not safe, but he's good. And you see, God is not always safe. Following Jesus doesn't mean that your life's always going to be safe, right? These guys were following God as much as anybody else ever could, and their life is on the line. They're about to be thrown in a fiery furnace. But you see, God is both powerful and he is both good. You see, God is so powerful that should give you courage, because he is the very God that created the heavens and the earth just by his words. He said it and it came into being. And you see, you will have courage in your life. You will be able to stand up to the current of culture in your life. You'll be able to have courage when you realize that power, if you're following Christ, lives in you. The Bible says that if you've placed your faith in Jesus, the Spirit that raised Jesus from the dead is the Spirit that's living in you. But you have to wake up to that. You have to receive that by a gift, through faith, by grace. But here's what you need to know. It's this, is that you will live a puny life if you believe in a puny God. If you believe in a powerless God, you will live a powerless life. But if you believe in a powerful God, if you believe in a God that can move mountains, if you believe in a God that can do anything, if you believe in a God that can heal sick people, that can raise the dead, if you believe in that kind of God, you will live a life of power. Why? Because you're powerful? No, but because the God that lives in you is powerful. And because he can do anything, because he can do miracles. Now the question comes into play, well then why doesn't God do a miracle every time I ask him? Why doesn't he heal every person I pray for? And to that question, I don't know why. That's it's probably the biggest question ever. Is like, if God is so powerful and he's good, then why doesn't he just fix everything? And those are things that we don't have all the answers to that while we're here on earth. But what we do know is that we have the good news that one day it's all going to be brought right when we're in heaven. And that he works all things together for good, both the good and the bad. He brings good out of it while we're here on earth. But we know that God is powerful. We know that he can do anything. And so the result is we should be courageous. It should make you a more courageous person when you know that you have that power living inside you. It should give you the courage to share your faith when you're scared. It should give you the courage when you need to do the right thing, but you know that doing the right thing would make everybody think that you're stupid, or you're less than, or you're out of touch with culture. But you do it anyways because God's powerful, and you believe that he's with you, and he's working in you, and he's for you. But not only is he powerful, he's good. And we see in this passage, right, we know that God is powerful because basically they say, hey, bring it on. If you throw us in the fire, he can save us. God's powerful, he's able. But then they also say that he's good. Check this out. After they say he could save us, he's able to save us from the fire, they say this, but even if he doesn't, even if he decides not to. You see how these guys had the right attitude? They said God can save us, but he doesn't have to. We don't deserve it. They said, he can save us, he's powerful, but even if he doesn't, we're still not going to worship your God, King Nebuchadnezzar. Why? How could they say that? How could they say, God, even if you don't save us, we're still not going to worship false gods? This is why they could say it. They could say it because they believed in the goodness of God. They could say it because they believed that God was good and that God was great and that those idols were trash. They believed that the true God was better than the false gods. They believed, catch this is key, that the goodness of God was not dependent on whether or not they experienced physical suffering. You need to know this in your life. The goodness of God is not dependent on whether or not you go through a hard time. Just because you go through a breakup, just because somebody in your family had a sickness, just because life is just going crazy right now, doesn't mean God isn't good. They say, even if he doesn't save us, we'll still stand tall. Even if he doesn't save us, we're still going to praise him. Even if he lets us burn to death, we're still going to go. And you see, that is what will bring you courage. It's when you realize that he's good and that he's better than anything else. I'll give you a practical example of this. It's going to be really hard. This is just a hypothetical situation. I've never seen this happen before. That's sarcasm, by the way, right? Is if you're dating a non-Christian and you're a Christian, and God is telling you to break up with them. Now, that's going to take a lot of courage. It's going to take a lot of courage to say no to somebody that you care about and you're connected to. It's going to take a lot of courage to do that. Now, if you think that your way is better than God's way, you're not going to have the courage to do that. If you think that your idea of what a relationship should be is better than what God has for you, you're not going to have the courage to do it. But here's the thing, if you believe that God is good, if you believe that he is loving, if you believe that all that you need is in him and that all that he offers you is better than anything you could ever do yourself, if that's what you believe, if you believe in the goodness of God, you will have the courage to say no to the things that he says aren't right for you. And so how does the goodness of God give you courage? It gives you courage because you'll be able to stand up to what's wrong in this world because you'll know that his way is better. And you'll have the conviction to do it. Because to say, you know what? I'm going to stand up for what's not popular because I believe that what's not popular is actually better. And I'm not going to go with the crowd. I'm going to go with what God says because God knows best. And everything that he has said is said because he loves me and because he loves everyone. And so here's the thing. When you believe that God is powerful, that he can do anything, when you believe in his goodness, you will be more courageous. So then the question is where is your faith? Do you believe in the goodness of God? Do you believe in the power of God? Have you experienced it? You see, it's the degree of your faith in his goodness and in his power that will determine how courageous you are. How courageous are you? Now here's the amazing part. We're going to stop here in the story, and I'm going to close our time together. You're like, what? Are they going to get thrown in the fire? I don't know. Well, that's what we're going to get to next week. But here's what you need to know. Check this out. These three guys, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they say, God is able to save us. God is able to save us from this earthly fire. Surely he created the whole world with his own words. Surely God is able to save us from this earthly fire. But check this out. Not only is God able to save us from the earthly fire, but if we place our faith in him, he will always save us from the eternal fire that is in hell. And I want to close with Revelation chapter 21, verses 6 to 8. This is what God is saying. Revelation chapter 21, verses 6 to 8. It says this. God says, I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. To the thirsty I will give water without cost, from the spring of the water of life. And those who are victorious will inherit all of this. And I will be their God, and they will be my children. But the cowardly, the unbelieving, the sexually immoral, those who practice magical arts, the idolaters, and all liars, they will be consigned to the fiery lake of burning sulfur. This is the second death. So here's what God is saying. He's describing hell here. He's saying hell is a real place. It is a conscious place where you are alive and you are awake. And he uses this image of fire. And we don't know if there's going to be fire there or not, whether this is just symbolic. But the point is it's not pleasant. And the point is you're separated from a real, genuine, close, connected relationship with God. And he says hell is a real place for those that reject Jesus. For those that are too cowardly to follow him and to place their faith in him. And want to just go with the crowd and go with the world and love the world more than they love God. But catch this. Before he talks about the burning fires of hell, he says this. He says, to those that are thirsty, I will give them water without cost. Without cost. What is he saying? He's saying if you're thirsty. He's saying if you know you need God, if you know that you need forgiveness, if you know that you need to be saved, if you know that you followed the current of culture and you're drowning and you can't save yourself and you're thirsty, you're hungry for God, you know you need God, that he will save you without cost. And you see, that is the grace of God. It's without cost. It's his free gift of love in your life. It's the fact that you've messed up, that you've sinned, that you've rebelled against God. And he says, you know what? If you just know that you need me, if you'll just come to me, I will save you without cost. Because God doesn't love you because of who you are, but because of who he is. He gives you a gift. It's his forgiveness. It's his presence. It's a relationship with him. And you see, when you're saved by him, and you know that you have the promise of heaven instead of the promise of hell, that will give you a courage where you won't even be scared of death. Because you won't see death as a negative, you'll see death as a doorway to seeing Jesus face to face. And so the question is do you have that faith? Do you have the courage that comes from knowing heaven is on the other side? Do you have the courage that comes from a relationship with Jesus? If you don't, you can place your faith in Jesus today. You can come to Jesus today. If you're drowning, if you've been following the current of culture, if you've been following the crowd, all you have to do is just lift up your hand and say, Jesus, save me. He'll grab your hand and he'll pull you out. It's without cost. It's a free gift, but you have to ask. And if you want to do that tonight, you simply call on him. You say, Jesus, I give you my life. I want to ask you to save me. You can do that right where you're at, right now, wherever you are. You can pause this video, call to him. He'll answer. But here's the thing, is no matter where you're at in your faith, whether you have faith, you don't have faith, maybe you're taking the first step of faith right now as we're speaking, you can come to Christ knowing that it's through his power, through his goodness, through his promise of heaven, that you can have a courage where you will be able to go against the current of culture and make a difference and not conform to the world, but transform it through the power of his Spirit in your life. Let me pray for you, and then we'll have two last songs. Jesus, I thank you so much that you want to give us courage, that you love us, Lord, that you are so amazing, And God, I pray right now for those that are watching, Lord, maybe there are some here that they don't know you, and they've never had the courage that comes from knowing you. Lord, I pray that your presence would just be with them, that you'd give them courage. Lord, there are those of you that maybe they've known you for a certain amount of time, but they haven't been walking in the courage. Lord, I pray that you'd give every believer the courage to follow you, to share you, and to be a shining light in this dark world. In Jesus' name, amen.
I don't know where my pick went. It's good. We're going to sing a new song. Josh picked it. It's pretty good. I like it. It's very long. But yes, let's do it. There is a grace when the heart is under fire. Another way when the walls are closing in. And when I look at the space between where I used to be and this reckoning, I know I will never be alone. There's another in the fire, standing next to me. There is another in the waters, holding back the seas. And should I ever need reminding of how I've been set free, there's a cross that bears the burden where another died for me. There is another in the fire. All my dead are dead beneath the waters. I'm no longer a slave to my sin anymore. And should I fall in the space between what remains of me in this reckoning, either way I won't bow to the things of this world. And I know I will never be alone. There's another in the fire, sitting next to me. There's another in the waters, holding back the seas. Should I ever need reminding what power set me free? There's a grave that holds nobody. Now that power lives in me. There is another in the fire. Whoa, 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 and I can see the light in the darkness as the darkness clouds to him. I can hear the roar in the heavens as the space between wears thin. I can feel the ground shake beneath us as the prison walls cave in. 'Cause nothing stands between us. Nothing stands between us. There is no other name but the name that is Jesus. He who was and still is and will be through it all. So come what may in the space between all the things unseen in this reckoning, I know that I'll never be alone. And I know that I'll never be alone. There was another in the fire, sitting next to me. There'll be another in
back the seas. And should I ever need reminding of how good you've been to me, how kind of joy come every battle, 'cause I know that is where you'll be. And I can see the light in the darkness as the darkness bows to him. And I can hear the roar in the heavens as the space between was thin. And I can feel the ground shake beneath us as the prison walls cave in. 'Cause nothing stands between us. Nothing stands between us. Fire, singing next to me. There'll be another in the waters, holding back the seas. And should I ever need reminding of how good you've been to me, I'll count the joy come every battle, 'cause I know that is where you'll be. I'll count the joy come every battle, 'cause I know that is where you'll be. I'll count the joy come every battle, 'cause I know that's where you'll be.
My pick is going to fall out my hands if I don't dry it off. All right, let's do it.
You are here, moving in our midst. I worship you, I worship you. You are here, working in this place. I worship you, I worship you. 'Cause you are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. One more time. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. You are here, touching every heart. I worship you, I worship you. You are here, healing every heart. I worship you, I worship you. You are here, turning lives around. I worship you, I worship you. You are here, mending every heart. I worship you, I worship you. Oh Lord, you are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Yeah, you are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Yeah, come on, that is who you are. 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 Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop, you never stop working. You never stop, you never stop working. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop working. You never stop working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop working. You never stop working. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Come on. Yeah, you are. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. 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 Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are.
Man, so good. Hey, thanks again, everybody, for joining us online today. We love you so much. Real quick, before you click elsewhere and start watching other YouTube videos or maybe old sermons, hey, that might be a good idea. But before you do that, there should be a link in the group chat. It's titled Next Steps. If you wanted to follow Jesus for the first time today, or maybe you just want to connect with us because you need some prayer, go ahead and fill that form out. We'll be able to see it and just connect with you to encourage you on your spiritual journey. But we love you all so much. We'll see you next week online. Hopefully we'll be able to be back in person sooner rather than later. But please just stay updated with us, as we're just going to continue to update you on social media, on everything we're doing and not doing. And it is changing. So please stay updated with us. Thanks for being patient with us. See you next time.